We are not in a constitutional crisis. We're in a constitutional conflict, and the conflict is being worked out between the three branches of government.
Now, over the weekend, Donald Trump ordered the deportation of 300 alleged Venezuelan gang members without a hearing in an immigration court or even a criminal conviction. The US District Judge James Boasberg ruled against this, and then Trump called for the judge to be impeached. In response, the leader of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice John Roberts, said impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. Alan Dershowitz represented Donald Trump in his first impeachment trial in 2020, and he joins us now. Mr. Dershowitz, the administration invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 in order to justify these deportations without the need for a due process. It's an act which is only supposed to be invoked in the event of war, which Congress should be able to declare. Not in the current circumstances. Isn't this just a blatant misuse of the law?
No, I don't think so. The law provides also for invasion, and there's an argument that maybe when the Venezuelan government allowed so many people to come in from mental hospitals, it constituted a kind of invasion, but it will be reversed on appeal. In the end, probably the act is not applicable. But the idea of an impeachment is really just rhetorical. I represented President Trump in his impeachment, and I argued that for there to be an impeachment, you have to satisfy the constitutional criteria: treason, bribery, other high crimes and misdemeanors. And a judge making a mistake about the law doesn't justify impeachment. Also, you need 2/3 of the Senate to impeach. That won't happen. So what we're seeing is our checks and balances in operation. Britain doesn't have a system of checks and balances. Most countries don't. We do. We have three equal branches of the government, and it's working. So we're going to see a lot of back and forth. In the end, Trump will probably be able to get these folks deported because they probably don't have green cards or visas. And if they do, many of them probably engaged in fraud to get them. And so the law will ultimately allow them to be deported, but there'll probably have to be some due process and some hearings. And so we're going to see back and forth. But in the end, there won't be an impeachment.
If you think these are people he would be able to deport, it's surprising that he hasn't gone about doing it in the right way to begin with. You mentioned the checks and balances that we all expect the American Constitution to be able to uphold. And yet this is an administration which hasn't just deported these Venezuelan gang members without due process. There has been some deportations with due process, and even though judges have declared that people shouldn't be deported, they have been. Planes have flown despite a judge's decision. We've also had another court declaring Elon Musk as being unconstitutional for closing down departments without consulting Congress. Is this an administration? Is this a president who thinks he's above the law?
Oh, absolutely not. And this is not a constitutional crisis. For example, the decision about firing Elon Musk is wrong, and it will be reversed. Elon Musk does have the authority to advise the president. So we're going to get some decisions that are correct, some decisions that are wrong. That's the way the system plays out. I think President Trump, more than any other president since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, is pushing the envelope, is trying to test the limits of his power. And he's being rebuffed even by some justices who he appointed. Justice Barrett voted against him, and many Republicans are furious at her. But the system really is working. The president pushing it very hard. There are some judges who are pushing back very hard. But I think in the end, the system will work. President will win some, will lose some, and the end result will be the Constitution will work. It's been working now for 230 years. It's going to continue to work. We are not in a constitutional crisis. We're in a constitutional conflict, and the conflict is being worked out between the three branches of government. And I think it will work. For example, take this guy Khalil, who is being deported from Columbia University. Almost certainly he lied in his application, because the application for a visa and for a green card requires you to say you do not in any way support any group that is a terrorist group. And it's inconceivable that this guy just suddenly became a supporter of Hamas overnight. So it's very likely that once they do the investigation, and they will find out that Khalil did not tell the truth on his visa application. And if they find that out, then he'll be deportable. But even he is exercising free speech rights in advocating for Hamas. So these are going to be complicated cases. They'll take years to be finally litigated. I think Trump is in a rush. That's why he used the Alien Act of 1798, because that doesn't require a hearing. He could have gotten these
He's not
folks.
waiting for due process.
Hmm?
He's ignoring it.
He doesn't think he needs due process. And look, in some instances you don't. If you find a person in the street in New York and he's just snuck into the country and he doesn't have a green card or a visa, and you ask him how did he come in, and he said he snuck in, generally the law permits that person to be deported. But if he challenges it and says, no, my green card's home, give me a chance to get it, then there is due process. So due process is a matter of degree. Remember the word itself, due process. The process that's due you and the due process that's required for undocumented aliens is very different from the due process, for example, that's due to an naturalized citizen.
We'll see what the courts make of it tomorrow. Alan Dershowitz, thanks very much for joining us.
A U.S. judge on Tuesday demanded more details from the Trump administration on 2 deportation flights that took off this weekend, despite his order temporarily banning the removal of people from the United States under an 18th century law known as the Alien Enemies Act. The Trump administration defended the deportation of Venezuelans, who they say were members of the Tren de Aragua gang. In a court filing, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement official Robert Cerna said 3 planes carrying deportees departed for El Salvador on Saturday, after an order by President Donald Trump. He added in a sworn declaration that only one of those flights took off, after U.S. District Judge James Boasberg imposed a 2-week ban on deportations under the Alien Enemies Act, a law historically only used in wartime. Since everyone aboard that plane had separate removal orders, Cerna argued that they were not deported under the 1798 Act alone. This was all in response to the judge's request about the timing of Saturday's deportations. On Tuesday, Trump called for the impeachment of the judge in the case on his Truth Social platform, without identifying Boasberg by name. Then, in a rare statement issued by the U.S. Supreme Court, Chief Justice John Roberts rejected Trump's call for the judge's impeachment, saying it was, quote, not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me.
Trump's post marked the first time since his second term as president that he has called for a judge's impeachment. To remove a judge from office, the House must pass articles of impeachment by a simple majority vote, and then the Senate must vote by at least a 2/3 majority to convict the judge. Republicans control both chambers of Congress, but do not have a 2/3 majority in the Senate.
A U.S. judge on Monday ordered the Trump administration to give details about the hundreds of Venezuelans it had deported, despite that judge blocking them from doing so. Judge James Boasberg also gave the administration until Tuesday to explain why it believed it had complied with his order. The White House said the more than 200 Venezuelans deported to El Salvador were members of the Tren de Aragua gang. The deportations happened over the weekend, many under an 18th century law known as the Alien Enemies Act, historically used only in wartime. Lee Gallant, a lawyer at the American Civil Liberties Union, spoke to reporters after Monday's hearing.
We had serious concerns going into the day that the government violated a federal court order. Today did nothing to dispel it. If anything, it reinforced that our view that the government may very well have violated this order, perhaps even knowingly violated. The president is simply thumbing his nose at Congress. Congress has said when you can use the Alien Enemies Act.
Also on Monday, White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt defended the administration's move.
This administration acted within the confines of the law, again, within the president's constitutional authority and under the authority granted to him under the Alien Enemies Act.
Monday's hearing followed a request by the government to remove the judge from the case. And shortly prior to the hearing, the Trump administration said the judge's directive to return any planes carrying the migrants was not enforceable because it was not in a written order. The administration also said it did not violate a subsequent written order because the planes had already departed when it was issued. Several legal experts interviewed by Reuters viewed the flights as a direct challenge to the judicial branch's independence. Meanwhile, the president of Venezuela's National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, said the deported men were denied due process by the U.S. Since taking office in January, Trump has sought to push the boundaries of executive power, cutting spending authorized by Congress dismantling agencies, and firing tens of thousands of federal workers.